You glance at your phone, tap in an address, and a glowing blue line appears, showing you exactly how to get there, down to the turn, down to the minute. You don't think about it, you just follow the line. But somewhere underneath that habit is one of the strangest things humans ever learned to do. Turning the entire world into a small symbol you can hold in your hand, study, and hand to someone else.
You'd assume map-making came after writing, after civilization, after humans had already figured out how to record complicated ideas. Except that assumption falls apart almost immediately, because some of the oldest maps we've ever found are older than written language itself. So what were humans actually doing, drawing the shape of the world, before they even had a way to write down their own names? Let's start with the evidence. In 2013, archaeologists studying a rock shelter in Lascaux, France, one of the same cave systems famous for its painted animals, identified a cluster of dots and lines that some researchers argue represents a star map or a landscape layout dated to roughly 16,500 years ago. That's thousands of years before the first cuneiform tablets, thousands of years before anyone on Earth had a formal writing system.
But the oldest confirmed map, the one most archaeologists agree on without much argument, was carved into a mammoth tusk found near Pavlov in the modern-day Czech Republic. It dates back around 25,000 years, and it shows what researchers believe is a river, a mountain, and a hunting camp, all laid out in relative position to one another. Someone took a piece of ivory, and instead of just remembering the land in their head, they carved a version of it that could outlive their own memory and be handed to somebody else. Think about what that actually requires. To make a map, you have to take something enormous, a valley, a mountain range, a river system, something you can never see all at once with your own eyes, and shrink it down into a symbol small enough to carry. That's not simple observation, that's abstraction. You have to hold the whole landscape in your mind, decide what matters and what doesn't, and then translate it into marks that mean something to someone who's never been there. No other animal on Earth does anything close to that. Plenty of species navigate incredibly well, birds crossing oceans, salmon returning to the exact stream they hatched in. But none of them externalize that knowledge into a shareable object. A bird's migration route lives and dies with the bird. A human's map outlives the person who drew it. So why did that matter enough for humans to start doing it tens of thousands of years ago? The obvious answer is survival. If you know where the water is, where the herds migrate, where the cliffs drop off without warning, that information keeps you alive. But here's the detail that changes the whole picture. Maps weren't just useful to the person who made them. They were useful because they could be given away. Imagine you're part of a small group, and you've spent years learning the safe river crossings, the seasonal hunting grounds, the places predators tend to ambush. All of that knowledge is trapped in your head. If you die, or you're not around when someone needs it, that knowledge disappears with you. But if you scratch it into a tusk, a rock face, a piece of bark, it survives you. It can travel to people you'll never meet. A map is memory that doesn't need the original person to still be alive. That single idea, information that outlives the individual, might be one of the most important inventions in human history, and it happened long before anyone had the tools to write a sentence. Archaeologists have found evidence of this kind of spatial knowledge sharing across wildly different, unconnected cultures. Aboriginal Australians developed songlines, routes across the continent encoded not in physical drawings, but in song and story, where the melody itself contained turn-by-turn directions across thousands of miles of desert. Inuit hunters in the Arctic carved wooden coastal maps you could hold in one hand and read entirely by touch, useful even in total darkness or blinding snow, when your eyes were useless but your fingers weren't. Completely different environments, completely disconnected populations, and yet the same instinct kept showing up. Take the shape of the land and turn it into something that can be passed on.
And this is where maps stop being just a survival tool and start becoming something closer to a social technology. Whoever held detailed knowledge of the land held real power. Trade routes, water sources, safe passages through hostile territory, all of that was leverage. Sharing a map with someone was an act of trust. Refusing to share one could be an act of control. Long before kings and borders and property lines, the earliest maps were already doing something borders would later formalize, deciding who got to know what and who didn't.
By the time actual writing shows up, around 3400 BCE in Mesopotamia, map-making wasn't some new invention riding in on the coattails of literacy. It was already an old, established human habit, tens of thousands of years deep, that writing simply gave a new format to. One of the oldest known city maps, a clay tablet from the ancient city of Nuzi, dates to around 2300 BCE and shows fields, waterways, and property boundaries with remarkable precision, a bureaucratic descendant of a habit that started on cave walls and mammoth tusks millennia earlier. Maps kept evolving as human curiosity and ambition both grew side by side. Around 600 BCE, someone in Babylon pressed a small clay tablet that still survives today, showing the known world as a flat disk surrounded by a ring of water, with Babylon placed proudly at the center. It's wildly inaccurate by modern standards, but that's not really the point. It shows humans weren't just mapping to survive anymore. They were mapping to understand their place in something bigger, to answer the question of where they stood relative to everything else that existed. A map had quietly become a way of thinking about the world, not just moving through it.
And there's a reason this impulse runs so deep, one that neuroscience only figured out fairly recently. In 1971, researchers studying rats discovered specialized brain cells that fire only when an animal is in a specific location, cells that were later named place cells. Follow-up research uncovered grid cells, neurons that fire in a repeating pattern that effectively lays an internal coordinate system over the space around you. Your brain isn't just remembering a route, it's building an actual internal map, constantly, whether you're aware of it or not. Famously, researchers studying London taxi drivers, who have to memorize thousands of streets to pass a notoriously difficult licensing exam, found their hippocampus, the brain region tied to spatial memory, was physically larger than average and grew larger the longer they'd been driving. Map-making isn't just something humans invented out in the world. It's something your brain has apparently been doing internally the entire time. And at some point, we simply learned to take what was happening inside our heads and carve it into something external, something permanent, something that could survive us. So here's the full picture. Around 25,000 years ago, someone carved a river, a mountain, and a camp into a piece of ivory. Not because anyone told them to, but because they understood something we still rely on today. That the world is too big to hold in memory alone, and too important to lose when one person is gone. Across deserts, Arctic coastlines, and painted caves, completely unconnected groups of humans kept arriving at the exact same solution: shrink the world down and hand it to someone else.
That's the part that should stick with you. A map was never really about geography. It was about trust between people who might never meet. A promise that the knowledge one person paid for with years of walking, watching, and surviving wouldn't simply vanish when they did. So the next time that blue line appears on your screen, guiding you turn by turn to somewhere you've never been, remember what you're actually looking at. Not a modern convenience, not an app, the latest version of an idea that's at least 25,000 years old. That the world can be shrunk down, carried in your hand, and given to a stranger, so that no one ever has to walk into the unknown completely alone.